Good afternoon. My name is Tanya and I'm Director of Corporate Governance in Polymetal. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Governance Institute, which for the past 100 years was called the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, but last year changed its name to show that governance is gaining pace in the corporate world. So now we're all directors of governance instead of company secretaries. So, clicker. I'm going to talk about reporting landscape and why at the moment governance is so important and why so many people talk about that. Then we're going to talk about why it matters for us as companies, because we are not non-for-profit. There should be something in it that makes us good corporate citizens. And finally, I will not talk as much what we do. Maybe you will have some questions how we approach governance in Polymetal and why we managed to achieve such high corporate ratings. So, will you happen to remember what happened 3 years ago in October 2016? This lady gave a speech at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. So obviously the most part of this conference was dedicated to orderly exit from the European Union, which didn't quite happen. But there was another bit to it which was very important for us as companies. So what she was saying was too many people in position of power behave as though they have more in common with international elites than with people down the road, the people who they employ, the people they pass in the street. The next bit was if you are a boss of who earns a fortune but doesn't look after your staff, I'm putting you on warning. This cannot go on anymore. Later this year, we will publish our plans to have not just consumers represented on company boards, but workers as well. Taking the lead on cracking down on modern slavery wherever it is found. And finally, ratifying the Paris Agreement on climate change. So why this is important? In the midst of of Britain exiting the European Union, she still finds time to talk that put corporations on a warning list, effectively saying that, guys, if you don't behave, there's going to be a lot of legislation coming your way. We will make sure that you do what you're supposed to be doing. So most of this actually in the past 2.5 years came into force, except probably the top bit, which talks about consumer representatives and workers on the board. And actually the whole rhetoric of this thing looks very much labor. It's very much not conservative what they're talking about. So this is a very important milestone when it's changed from being from companies running for the shareholders to company actually working for the bigger society. So after this change, the whole whirlpool of legislation came our end, and this is, there are codes, there are regulations, and there is some secondary legislation which some of which you have to comply or explain, some of which is compulsory. So basically, what do we have now? This is our Bible. This is FRC UK Corporate Governance Code. If you are a premium listed company, you have to comply. And long past the years when you had a chance to explain if you're not in compliance, it's gone. You have to comply like word by word with the governance code. The next one is the Department of Business, Energy and Industry produced some secondary legislation. So if you are incorporated in the UK or if you have more than 250 employees in the UK, there is more compliance going your way with CEO, with director ratios, with more disclosure in your annual report about how you engage with stakeholders and suppliers. My Institute of Chartered Secretaries issued a guidance on stakeholder voice, and this came 2 years ago. And the reason why this came into force is this bit of legislation. This is another guidance issued by legal counsels of FTSE 100 companies on Section 172, and I'm going to talk much more about this Section 172, which is part of Companies Act. So if you are incorporated in the UK, you should have been compliant since 2006, but not that many companies took notice of this article. This is one of the most important articles that is out there at the moment. Non-financial reporting regulation, this makes sure that in your annual report you have a special section dedicated to anything non-financial. This talks about your policies, about governance, about how you engage with shareholders, with stakeholders, and this is all in one place. The previous year was the first year when this was reported by most of the companies, but there is still a way to go to make sure that it's, and this is part of FRC, so FRC is going to review how companies are compliant, but they give us a few years just to make sure that we all know what we're doing. So this is FRC Guidance on Strategic Report, which describes, among other things, non-financial reporting regulation. Guidance on Strategic Report is a 100-page document. It's a massive, massive document, but it's very important that when you write your annual report, you read what you're supposed actually to be writing in your annual report. Task Force on Climate Change financial disclosure, and finally, website disclosures on modern slavery and gender pay. And you probably noticed a few months ago there was additional guidance coming out on modern slavery, so there is a wider disclosure that you're supposed to be doing at the moment. I'm not going to talk about gender pay, and actually for this start of the day we had very diverse presenter panel, I have to say, because most of the time you come and you only see men talking, and we had like to date we had like 3-1, so well done on gender diversity. So how do you make sense out of all this legislation coming your way? The first thing is stakeholder agenda. If you think that you no longer only report to your shareholders, the whole thing makes much more sense, so the stakeholder is now in the center of all the reporting regulation. So consider wider stakeholder, and it will make it a little bit easier for you to understand what is happening in the reporting landscape. So this is our Bible. This is UK Corporate Governance Code. If you are listed in the UK on the Premium Market London Stock Exchange, you have to comply. This year is the first year where companies are going to report under this new governance code, and it is going to be difficult because companies don't quite know just yet how to do it, and proxy advisors are not just yet sure how they're going to review the annual reports of the companies, but this is something that you should be like reading now and again. So first, what changed compared to the governance code that we had a few years ago? So it is shorter. It used to be odd 40 pages. Now it's about like 15. So makes it way easier to read and easier to make sense out of it. It moves much more towards companies explaining their general approach rather than being a box-ticking exercise. So you should explain what is behind all your policies rather than saying that we're doing this, we're doing that, and just please make sure that we're compliant. There is supporting principles are in a revised guidance on board effectiveness, and this is a lengthy document. It's not, you don't have to comply with it, but it's well worth the read if you have spare few hours and are really bored and can't fall asleep in the evening. So the next bit is reporting. So now there is a significant shift. You report on principles rather than how they applied, rather than which principles you have. Report meaningfully, avoid boilerplates. So again, long past the days when you go to another company that you fancy and cut and paste, you need to produce your own piece of work. And articulate actions and outcomes that you're expecting from your policies. This bit is important as well. This is board role in culture, and this actually came from the bank, so this is entirely their fault. That's when rogue bankers were running around doing like stupid things, so this is the reason why we have this now. But it obviously, it's obvious, the board is in charge, so you should, defining the culture is the first step to take, and then just build it from there. For our company, we only started outlining our board culture in the last annual report, and this is still work in progress because you cannot change, you don't have to change the company. You need to first understand what is your culture, put it on the paper, and then think whether this culture is aligning with your strategy. This is my favorite section, 172, and there is another separate slide on that, so I'm not going to talk too much over here. One thing that is very important, and don't overlook it, is the mechanism of workforce engagement. And if we go back to the speech of Theresa May, she was suggesting that workforce representatives should be sitting on the board. This is no longer the case. So this is one of 3 options that the governance code is giving to you, but it is an option. But for our company, we thought that this is not the way we want to go. So we are making a combined approach of workforce engagement. Independence, what changed, it has been always 9-year limit for your board, but now it covers the chair of the board as well, so have a thorough look at how long is the tenure of your board members. If they're approaching 9 years, make sure that you have good succession plan, because you will be hit by proxy advisors saying that your board is not independent, and this was part of the journey for Polymetal, because we were listed back in 2011. And our board pretty much expires next year, so we had to start like 2 years ago to make sure that we don't have this cliff edge when all directors are resigning. So this is important to schedule very well how your directors are coming on board and stepping off the board, because you need to have some continuity on the board so that not the entire board changes. People should have some kind of idea what your company is doing. Shareholder engagement. This is another area which is very important, and I'm going to again to talk about this a little bit later. But what is important to know is that if you get 20% vote against any of the resolutions recommended by directors, you are going on name and shame list. So you have 6 months to report back to your shareholders what you are doing to improve and not to avoid this embarrassment next year. And remuneration. This is the biggest bit. Workforce, when people receive annual report, a lot of your employees will go straight to your remuneration section to know how much directors are earning, and they will make their own conclusions. So governance code prescribes that workforce remuneration should be taken into account when setting the policy. This is not you don't have to consult with your workforce, but you need to know how much they're earning, and the whole structure of the pay should be aligned with the workforce. And one of the bits that comes straight away is pension. So pension is very important, and proxy advisors are looking very, very thoroughly what companies are doing with their pension plans. So if your pension for directors is way above your workforce, you need to have a really good think what you're going to do about that. Engagement with workforce is you need to explain to them how you structure your pay, and again, you don't have to consult with them. In your remuneration, there is focus on clarity, simplicity, risk, predictability, proportionality, and alignment to culture and policy. So this goes all the way back to culture, and the whole entire code is revolving around culture, around engagement, around what you do with your stakeholders. LTIP, if you have an LTIP, now there is a rule to have a 5-year vesting. So you can have 5-year vesting plus 1-year holding period. But again, if you have an LTIP which is not quite compliant, you need to have a look at that. And one important thing, the final thing, is post-cessation shareholding requirements. So directors are expected to hold there is no set norm, but what is emerging looks like you have to hold 100% of your annual salary for 2 years after you leave the company before you can sell them. And the companies are supposed to have a mechanism in place which will prevent you from selling the shares if you're a director. So Section 172 Companies Act came back in 2006, but because, again, there was a lot of emphasis on shareholders, some companies didn't quite pay attention, but the reason why now it is important, it is incorporated into the governance code. So even if you are not listed in the UK, but listed on the premium, on the London Stock Exchange premium listing, you have to comply with this. So, and this sounds like really, really obvious, but I would like to remind the section. So, duty to promote the success of the company for the benefit of its members as a whole, having regard to the likely consequences of any decision in the long term. So, long-termism is very, very important, and this is why holding shares after leaving the company is coming into play. The interest of the company's employees. So, employees are actually the first stakeholder that is mentioned in the Companies Act. So, it's not shareholders, so that's employees who are important. Next one, need to foster the company's relationship with suppliers, customers, and others. So suppliers, customers, and other key business relationship. And what came from Theresa May's speech is that now there is regulation which requires you to disclose how you actually interact with your suppliers. The impact of the company's operation on the community and the environment, and for us as mining companies, this has been there for a long time. So this is something which we are doing fairly well. The desirability of the company maintaining reputation for high standards of business conduct. And finally, the need to act fairly between the members of the company. So only here the shareholders come into play. So that's how the legislation is structured. So shareholders are no longer, surprisingly, supposed to be the main, the main beneficiaries of the company's operation. So this was the UK. So what happens in the USA? So what is common about all these major US companies? So for very, very many years, US has been the main force behind shareholders being the main stakeholder of the company. So what happened in August is 181 US corporations signed the statement on the purpose of a corporation, and there will be some surprises there. So we commit to delivering value to our customers, investing in our employees, dealing fairly and ethically with our suppliers, supporting the communities in which we work, and generate long-term value for shareholders. So you see, it's again, the shareholders are the last, mentioned last in the statement of principle in the US, which is pretty much unheard of. So, since 1978, Business Roundtable periodically issued principles of corporate governance. Each version since 1997 stated that corporations exist principally to serve the shareholders, so now it changed. Now they state that shareholders are actually at the very bottom of the pecking order. So why this matters? In the end, we're here to make money. Shareholders are here to make money. So why would we care so much about communities, about stakeholders, about employees? So there are these guys out there. So if you are big enough to be reviewed by proxy advisors, these are the people who you know very well. PERC is in a bit of a league of its own, and unless your investors are Norfolk City Council, you pretty much don't have to pay too much attention to their recommendations. And in the past few years, they became more and more radical. So some people are saying if you don't get negative votes from PERC, you're not trying too hard. Glass Lewis is New Kids on the Block. This is an American company, very strong with shareholder engagement, very strong with companies engagement. So if you, they have all their and PERC doesn't disclose their policies, so they tell you what to do without actually telling how to do it. So that's Glass Lewis is very different. They have all their policies disclosed. They are very happy to engage with you. They will ask you for a call, and they will talk to you, and they will talk through all the policies that you have and will say whether they're happy with them, not happy, and make suggestions how you could improve. ISS and Investment Association are coming very strong at the moment. ISS has changed completely the structure, how they work. There was a lot of emphasis on selling their reports. Now it seems to be they're calming down a little bit, and they are merging. They had so many different sections of ISS, so now they're merging it into one structure, so it became way easier to talk to them, and they have a window when the companies can give feedback on on the review of their policies. So if there are mistakes there, it's very easy to correct those mistakes. And if you have information that is not, I mean, if it's not correct, it's fine, but this will give an overview what you should be looking into if you want to improve your scores with ISS. And Investor Association, very strong at the moment. They are working very closely with Legal & General. And legal general is coming also very strong, and these proxy advisors don't really meet with the companies. Who meet with the companies, legal general will meet with you, and they're very happy to talk to you about your policies. And they hold annual breakfasts in September, in which they discuss what they are planning for next year, what are the policies, and they give really, really good overview of how it works. So if you are interested, you can contact them and ask to join this breakfast. It's going to be in the next 2 weeks, I think. So proxy advisors, they're very, very powerful. If you get a negative vote from them, it will be between 20 and 30% of your shareholders voting against. There is a big call to regulate, because at the moment they are pretty much running their own show. There are policies there. They're very, very similar between the companies. But it's hard, because they say no, you cannot really discuss with them because it's no longer comply or explain. So if they say no, you are running a very good chance of shareholders voting, not voting down your resolution, but having significant vote against, which I'll talk about what is the problem with that. Governance code, so it takes two to tango, so it's not only companies who should be reporting to the shareholders. Shareholders should be engaging with the companies, and for the past many years it has been a struggle to engage with them. They're very happy to talk to you if you're on the sell side. They wouldn't talk to you if you're on the governance side, because they don't have time, they don't have enough team members to talk to you. So revised stewardship code is going to publish late in 2019, and there is an expectation that there will be requirement for the shareholders actually to actively engage with the companies on governance and sustainability. So why this matters? You get a recommendation to vote against, so this is what's happening. Sentiment. 33% votes against directors' remuneration report on the basis of poor disclosure of bonus targets. Lonmin, 73% votes against bonus payment to a retiring director. Acacia Mining, 33% votes against increase in base salary and increase on-target bonus opportunity. Premier Oil, 41% votes against section on bonus performance measures and high payout levels. So people are watching. If you are big enough, you'll make it into newspapers. So Anglo American 2 years ago had to cap bonus payouts after shareholder revolt. Permission is not quite our area of business, but CEO had to be asked to leave following a shareholder backlash over 75% bonus. So if you get it wrong, it can get really, really wrong. You can get into newspapers of really negative publicity. Annual report on remuneration, it doesn't really matter, because it's not a vote that will prevent you from paying to the directors, but you should take notice, because if your vote is over 20%, you get on name and shame list, and you have to explain to your shareholders what you are doing to change your ways effectively. Employees. Employees are watching. There is director's pay ratio, which it will become compulsory from next year. But this year already 50% of companies disclosed. So if you haven't disclosed yet, and you are expected to be disclosed, and have a look at what other companies are disclosing to make sure that you are somewhere close, probably to the middle. So, and again, if you are not, find a good argument why you're not there, and you will have to explain to your shareholders why your ratio is way off other people. So employees care, and I know that a lot of people talk about millennials like a boo word at the moment. There are millennials out there who are like want this and want that, but nobody really knows who they are. But there is some research. It's old. It's 2016, but it keeps like repeating itself. So if you Google millennials workforce social responsibility, you will get pretty much similar results. So 75% of millennials will take a pay cut to work in a socially responsible company. 76% of millennials consider company social and environmental commitments before deciding where to work. 64% of millennials won't take a job if a potential employer doesn't have strong corporate responsibility practices. And obviously for mining company, all this area are it's very hard for us to compete with Googles and Amazons and companies like this. So we need to take this very, very seriously, because 2025, 70% will be millennials who take care of all those things. So it's very, very important for you to think what you're going to do to become a more socially responsible company. And this, I didn't know where to put this, but I really like this phrase, so I put it here. The rise of inclusive capitalism and the need to become a more purpose-led organization. So this idea of inclusive capitalism, when you no longer work for the shareholders, but actually need to consider so many more things around, becomes very, very prominent. Do you have any more slides? We have to talk about polymetals, so because this is supposed to be a case study. So this is a slide repeating Darius' slide. The only thing that I will probably focus a bit more on different parts. So we have 40% of female qualified personnel, which is quite important for a mining company. And think about diversity, because females make 50% of population, and many mining companies will be lucky if they get 20% of their workforce of females, and people are like asking questions why this is the case. Our staff turnover is only 5.8%. It is well below the market, and we are very proud that we have a lot of employees who stay with us for the entire career. So we have employees actually not leaving the company but retiring the company, which for a mining company is also quite uncommon. People usually leave well before they go into retirement. And we get 95% votes in favor of all our resolutions, which hopefully shows that we are well in line with the best practice of the governance code, and we have good communication with proxy advisors. If we have something not quite as they expect, we know how to explain why this is the case, and a lot of the time they will say that they're happy with our explanation. And there is some money there as well. So in 2017, EBRD provided bank financing to our Kyzyl plant, which is our biggest operation in Kazakhstan. There are better terms available on the basis of community engagement, environmental and social programs. And this is, we were the first company in 2019 to get a sustainability-linked loan. And it's linked to Sustainalytics, so that's why this rating become very important. So as long as we score high enough in Sustainalytics, we get the maximum discount on the loan. And I don't have a slide on how much more important sustainable investing is becoming, but this is an area to watch. Basically, it's growing very, very quickly. There are a lot of people considering doing that. There are very strict rules to enter the market, but if you are planning to do something, this is an area to watch, because sustainable financing is developing very, very quickly. So to make sure that we don't only do something nice to the people, actually there is some money there as well. So we're going to replicate the same loans with both European and Russian banks to make sure that we benefit, among other things, from our sustainability and governance efforts. So this concludes my presentation. And if you have any, actually we have 2 minutes left, so if you have any questions, I can be very happy to answer them.